right? If somebody like Anthony Gormley or Cause is building a 50-foot sculpture, they're not going out and doing that themselves. They have a team that specialize in those materials to fulfill that vision for them, right? That's very much how I think that the artists from the legacy art world will wind up entering this space, is through a studio relationship like you described. And so you said there's studio, there's, well, what about you described a nonprofit side. What's going on there?
Before we dive into that, I wanted to just say that I completely agree with what you just said of what the sort of legacy art world needs as far as assistance. And I think what's also super important for both sides is that there's a translator and an educator to help both sides really understand the value structure and the value system that is underpinning the other industry. So what I mean by that is, there's a real need often for education when it comes to, okay, well, why is an NFT project successful, right? There's, as we're seeing, there's, many legacy art world players expect that, okay, they can just associate an NFT to a physical artwork and sell a digital twin, and that's that, and it'll be successful. And the reality is that there's a significant likelihood that will just fall flat, and there won't be any awareness of the piece even selling. So there's a need to really co-curate projects. So that is sort of what we consider ourselves as like experts in doing. Is we have a team of crypto natives. We understand the NFT space and can educate people on, okay, we need you to think about like the reasons why community is so important here and within the NFT world. And in addition to just helping with the technology and the execution of the project, there's also a need to help educate both sides on the different value systems within each industry and what success really looks like. And as far as nonprofits are concerned, we want to build an open metaverse that we're proud of, that we're happy to exist in, that is more equitable, that is more diverse, and we really want to support nonprofits that across all cultural sectors that are building a future of culture that we're proud of. And so that's also part of our investment strategy longer term.
The investment side, I mean, are you operating like a small venture capital fund, or is it more, are they smaller investments into specific blockchain related projects?
So we're not a fund, we're a C Corp holding company, and we're investing a significant amount of the capital we've raised into acquiring essentially a corporate collection. And again, also investing in startups. So we have an analyst team and an investment committee, and the function of those two roles is to figure out the ideal investment strategy when it comes to which projects you want to acquire and what we believe to be the most iconic projects with the most potential, and the works that are sort of, aligned with our values as a company. And an example of one of our first acquisitions was a noun. We acquired noun number 9, and because we really believe in that project as representing so much about what we love about the NFT community and the potential of these projects.
What hurdles do you think need to be overcome for the NFT space to become everything it's capable of being?
I think there needs to be a lot of education on both sides. And by both sides, I mean the traditional art world and the NFT community. I think there's still a lack of understanding from both sides of the most beautiful and exciting elements of the other. As I mentioned earlier, many people within the legacy art world just see these massive sales and have no idea why they should just be excited by a Bored Ape, for instance, and they're thinking of it in the traditional sense of just purely aesthetically without understanding the collective nature of the project, the utility aspects of the tokens, right? I think there's still such a lack of understanding of the utility of NFTs and the potential to engage and reward and incentivize your collector base, who also then defines the future of the project, right? It's that nature of active collective ownership that I think there's still a lack of understanding of that. And I think, on a very basic level, the traditional art world has never existed on Twitter. Going back to Constitution DAO, Brooke Lampley, who was the ultimate winner of the Constitution, the specialist at Sotheby's, she just made a Twitter account last week to engage with with all of the hype that was sort of on Twitter about her. So on a basic level, there's a need for people within the legacy art world to engage with the NFT and crypto community to understand the value system, which currently feels very different from the value system of the art world. Another quote I read, Fanny Lakube in her weekly newsletter made a joke about how, last week the art world learned how to have fun. And I think there was, this sense of fun with regard to the Constitution DAO bidding. And generally speaking, the art world, it has been, it thrives a bit on exclusivity. It can be a bit impenetrable. Again, it's hard to understand. There's a lot of elitism that drives the space. And it's really quite the opposite in the Web3 community. And so I think there's a real opportunity for both sides to get to know one another. I don't want to necessarily just say that is the entire value structure within the art world, because the reasons why we're all so moved by art, that is, of course, very real. There's also a need to educate the NFT, Web3, and crypto community on the beauty of fine art as well, right? So I think there's still a ways to go before those two worlds really collide. I'm hoping there's openness to educating on both sides.
In the past, I've given an analogy to folks in conversations at dinner parties about when somebody enters the art world, whether they're a teenager or a grown adult that has really never really spent a lot of time thinking about the art world. They kind of come to it with a taste, a palate that, is more akin to McDonald's. And what they find is that a lot of the art world has developed this refined taste for sushi. And it takes a while for people to, establish this palate, right? We probably see some evidence of a divide. I feel like that crypto space has really kind of emerged from what would be called the lowbrow art movement. And there's a bit of a divide between there and the legacy art world. I think you're right that the bridge where both people can appreciate what the other is doing kind of lies in work that's far more conceptual. I think everybody kind of appreciates projects that push the bounds of what the medium can do, whether that's, generative art or what have you.
Yeah, I completely agree. And there are some artists, some incredibly iconic artists like Solowit, for instance, or Marcel Duchamp, who, were creating work in much of the same vein, or even, of course, the pop art movement. There's so much synergy between those movements, for instance, and what we're seeing in the evolution of crypto art. And I think, taking the time for the McDonald's consumer, as you said, to take the time to, experiment, to read more, to educate themselves, to go to museums and ask hard questions and be comfortable asking, what should I be feeling when I look at this and why? In the same way that people within the legacy art world should be reading articles, should be following people on Twitter, should be, asking similarly uncomfortable questions about what do you mean by metaverse? Are we in it now? Who's making it? There's a lot of discomfort that we need to plow through because again, as you said, this is all in many ways very conceptual and exciting. And that level of intellectual excitement, to your point, exists on both sides. The reasons why Marcel Duchamp is so intellectually stimulating is the same reason why a project like the Nouns is intellectually stimulating, right? And so if we can align in this interest in just the future of creativity and the future of culture as being, let's celebrate what is making us think the hardest and appreciate human creativity, then I think, we'll come to a meeting point at some point, I hope.
So is there a particular artist or project we should keep our eye on, something we shouldn't miss out on? You seem to have your finger on the pulse of these sorts of things, Anne. What should we not miss out on in 2021?
I'll answer that question in two ways. I think with regard to what we're going to see evolve in the NFT space, I think we're going to see an evolution of loyalty programs and membership structures, which I've always personally been really excited about. But I think, we'll see, hospitality companies and restaurants and, member clubs thinking about how to engage their member base with NFTs. And so I'm personally excited about that right now. And then from an artist and creativity perspective, two names that have been around for a while. I am personally, I've always been like a groupie fan of Sarah Mayohas and Bitcoin. And full disclosure, she's Metaversal's first artist in residence, which I'm really excited about. But I'm excited about what the future of Bitcoin will be, because we're seeing a lot of momentum behind female creators in the NFT space. It's really exciting being a woman in this industry right now. There's so much goodwill and support. And, we're seeing people like Reese Witherspoon and Gwyneth Paltrow coming in and buying World of Women. And so I think that Sarah is going to create a really exciting future of Bitcoin that's going to be a lot more encompassing of many different female artists. I hope. We'll see. So keep an eye on Sarah. And then also Michael Jew is another artist that I became close with during NFT NYC, and he was a co-creator of OG Crystals and that project. And he's actually, just putting a plug in, he'd be a great person for one of your podcasts, because he himself was a quote traditional sculptor and artist and collaborated with the technologists to create OG Crystals. And I think it's a perfect example of the merger of two minds, a beautiful artistic mind, a beautiful technology mind, and bringing them together. And they created this really special NFT project called OG Crystals. So those are two that are on my mind right now.
I'm going to have to promise my listeners that I didn't put you up to that, because I've already scheduled Michael and his collaborator to be on here in the next couple of weeks.
Oh,
and so
perfect. Perfect. Well, there you go.
Yeah. Oh,
free advertising.
Exactly.
He's brilliant.
Awesome. So, Anne, I really appreciate your time this morning, and just to be willing to just kind of open up and talk about this space and kind of give us the temperature on where we are and where we're headed. And, I really appreciate your insights and your transparency. And I really appreciate you being willing to be on the show today.
My pleasure. There's really nothing else I'd rather be talking about right now. So this has been a joy. Thank you.
Now, the news. After months of anticipation, we're finally getting to experience Pace Gallery's NFT plan. The platform, called Metaversal, launched yesterday with the availability of a handful of works by artist Lucas Samaras. That work from his XYZ series, which was created nearly a decade ago, is being repackaged as NFTs. That work was natively digital and is a logical fit for being sold as an NFT, with an accompanying physical copy of the work. Leading up to Art Basel Miami, Metaversal will drop additional digital assets from artists like Glenn Kano and Drift. The first NFTs on the platform sold out in short order at a price of $10,000 each, with a promise that the prices are only going up. Keep an eye out for real deals posing as copies. Two different headlines this week remind us to look closely the next time we're at an estate sale. First up, the story of a quintessentially British landscape painting that was sold in Cincinnati last year as a John Constable copy. Turns out it's not a copy, but the real deal. It will be going to auction in the coming weeks with a low auction estimate much higher than the $54,000 originally paid. Low auction estimate, $3 million. But that's nothing compared to the whopper of a story coming out of the Agnews Gallery in London. The story goes that an unnamed party paid $30 for a drawing that the person believed to be a modern Albrecht Dürer reproduction at an estate sale for architect Jean-Paul Carhian. Turns out Carhian's family had made its fortune in selling antiques, and his ancestors had been quite the art collectors. For whatever reason, it didn't dawn on the next generation that the Dürer drawing might actually be the real deal. And of course,